Sheriff Deputy Jake Morrison here. I've served the county for nearly a decade, dealt with meth labs that looked like rejected Breaking Bad sets, cartels with a flair for theatrics, and once, a dude who robbed a liquor store with a Nerf gun. But nothing, and I mean nothing, prepared me for the raw, unfiltered bureaucratic insanity I was about to face in Maple Ridge Estates. It started innocently enough. After years of dealing with the chaos of city life, I finally bought a modest 2-story home with a wraparound porch, a quiet cul-de-sac, and a lawn I was determined not to kill within the first month. The brochure said, "Welcome to paradise," but it forgot to include. Also includes one free power-hungry HOA dictator. Batteries and common sense not included. Enter Linda Patterson. Linda was the type of person who made you nostalgic for DMV employees. At least they had the decency to only ruin your day for an hour. She introduced herself in writing. A lovely bright yellow HOA violation notice slapped right onto my windshield like a parking ticket from the gods of suburbia. The crime? Parking my perfectly legal black SUV on my own damn driveway at an inappropriate angle. Yes, that's right. Apparently, I had committed a geometrical atrocity. The violation notice, written in what I would later come to recognize as her trademark weaponized purple ink, explained. Vehicle not within HOA specified alignment. Estimated deviation, 7 degrees. Permitted, 7 degrees. I didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or call in an airstrike. She even cited the exact rule, Section 4.3 of the HOA handbook, as if she moonlighted as a suburban lawyer with a PhD in parking lot feng shui. I stood there, holding the paper like it might start glowing with ancient curses, wondering what kind of person calculates vehicle angles in their spare time. Then I saw the fine. $25 for the first offense, doubling with each continued transgression. And at the bottom, written in a font so cheerful it felt like an insult. Community standards reflect community values. Let's keep Maple Ridge beautiful. Right. Because nothing screams beauty like driveway police with a clipboard and a rage boner for SUVs parked at a Johnny Tilt. Now, I'm a reasonable man. I've talked down armed lunatics in meth-fueled breakdowns. Surely I could reason with the woman who thinks angular parking is a gateway drug to societal collapse. That evening, I decided to pay Linda a neighborly visit. Her house was, of course, a living Pinterest board. 0 weeds, symmetrical hedges trimmed like a Marine's haircut, and not a single item out of place. I knocked, still in uniform pants and a plain black shirt, hoping the badge in my wallet might buy me some common sense. She answered the door like she was expecting the Queen of England, and had dressed accordingly. Navy blazer, pearl earrings, and a name tag that said Linda Patterson, HOA President, like it was a Medal of Honor. Her perfume hit me like a chemical weapon, floral, aggressive, and vaguely threatening. "You must be the new resident at 1247 Oakwood Drive," she said, scanning me up and down like she was doing a background check with her eyes. She held a tablet that may or may not have contained satellite surveillance footage of my driveway crimes. "Jake Morrison," I replied, extending a hand. "Deputy Sheriff with the county. Thought I'd introduce myself, and maybe clear up a little misunderstanding." Her expression didn't shift an inch. "Ah yes, the angular deviation issue. A troubling first impression, Mr. Morrison. Property values are fragile things. Right? And I'm sure you're passionate about geometry enforcement," I said, trying to keep my tone light. Linda's smile grew, though it somehow got colder. "We take our standards seriously here. A single misaligned vehicle today becomes a rusted-out RV tomorrow. It's a slippery slope. It's a black SUV, parked on my driveway, slightly to the left. A dangerous precedent," she said, like I'd just spray-painted gang signs on my garage. "I just wanted to let you know, I'm a deputy, and sometimes I come home late. I try not to make waves." "I appreciate your service," she interrupted, her voice dripping with insincerity. "But you see, being a public servant, I'm sure you understand better than anyone the importance of following rules." "Absolutely. I follow rules that make sense." She didn't blink. $25, Mr. Morrison. Cash or check. Due within 7 days. Have a blessed evening." And then she closed the door. Just like that. Like I was some kind of pyramid scheme salesman who tried to sneak past her fortress of suburban control. I stood there for a long moment, wondering if this woman had ever experienced actual conflict. The kind that doesn't involve lawn edging or mailboxes painted in the wrong hue of beige. But mostly I stood there thinking one thing. I was going to need a hell of a lot more patience. Or alcohol. Because I had just met the HOA's final boss. And she had a clipboard, purple ink, and absolutely no sense of irony. You ever walk into a room expecting a civil conversation and walk out feeling like you just lost a legal battle you didn't even know you were part of? That's exactly what happened the night I knocked on Linda Patterson's door. I came with the optimism of a man who still believed in neighborly dialogue. I left with the haunted expression of someone who just discovered the HOA handbook doubles as a psychological weapon. Her door opened with an unsettling smoothness, like it had been WD-40 in preparation for my arrival. Linda stood framed in the doorway like she was posing for a campaign ad titled, "Vote for me or I'll regulate you into oblivion." She was dressed in what I now understand to be her standard issue power outfit, a navy blue blazer so aggressively structured it might have been bulletproof, crisp white blouse, and slacks that looked like they'd been ironed with military precision. She didn't say hello. She said, "You must be the new resident at 1247 Oakwood Drive," like she'd been tracking me from the moment the moving truck pulled up. "Yes, ma'am," I replied, offering a polite smile. "Jake Morrison, Deputy Sheriff." "I know," she said, lifting her tablet like she was confirming a suspect in a lineup. "Linda Patterson, HOA President, Community Standards Coordinator, Neighborhood Watch Captain," and, she added with a beat of dramatic flair, "Acting Emergency Response Liaison." "Quite the resume," I said, trying to keep it light. She beamed like I'd just complimented her doctorate in tyranny. "I believe structure and accountability are the cornerstones of any thriving neighborhood." "I agree," I nodded. "Which is actually why I wanted to talk about the parking violation notice." "Oh yes, the angular deviation issue." She said it with the gravity of a nuclear treaty violation. "I'm glad you brought it up. It's so important to address these things early before bad habits become normalized." I blinked. "Bad habits?" She pulled up something on her tablet and tilted it toward me. Sure enough, there was a picture of my SUV with a red digital protractor overlaying it. The angle, 7.2 degrees. I half expected her to zoom in like CSI to enhance the tread marks. "As you can see, your vehicle was parked outside the approved alignment range. Section 4.3 clearly states, Ma'am, I understand the policy, but that's my personal vehicle. Parked on my personal driveway." Exactly. And yet, part of a shared visual space. We must all do our part to preserve aesthetic unity. We can't have chaos spilling from every driveway. Aesthetic unity? Chaos, she repeated, with the same tone you'd use for arsenic poisoning. I tried a different angle, pun intended. "Look, I just thought if you knew I was a sheriff's deputy, maybe we could apply a little common sense here. It's not like I've got a junkyard in my front yard." She smiled. That tight, all teeth, absolutely no soul smile. How wonderful. A public servant. "I'm sure you appreciate the importance of discipline." "I do. When it's attached to logic." Her smile didn't falter. "Unfortunately, the rules are quite clear. Deviations are violations, no matter one's employment status. But I wasn't obstructing anyone. I was parked in my own space. The angle was irrelevant. Rules don't bend just because someone wears a badge." She said it with the smugness of someone who thinks speed limits are moral law and jaywalking is an affront to society. I took a breath. "So you're saying there's no room for discretion here?" "None," she said, clasping her tablet to her chest like it was the Constitution. "Discretion leads to exceptions. Exceptions lead to disorder, and disorder. Well, you've seen what's happened to other neighborhoods." I nodded slowly. "Right. They let someone paint their mailbox blue and the whole block crumbled into Mad Max." She didn't even blink. "Exactly. Well, I guess I'll pay the $25. Cash or check. No credit cards." "Of course. Have a wonderful evening, Deputy Morrison." And with that, she turned and closed the door. Not slammed. No, that would have required emotion. It was a soft, deliberate click. The sound of someone who wins arguments, even when they make no damn sense. I stood there on her porch for a second, letting it sink in. I had just been outmaneuvered in a bureaucratic drive-by. She hit me with a regulation, cited a digital protractor, and closed with a smile, so rehearsed it should be trademarked. And that was the moment I knew. Linda Patterson didn't run an HOA. She ran a regime. This wasn't going to be a normal neighborly disagreement. This was going to be a war. A cold war of lawn heights and paint swatches. A clash of egos, clipboards, and purple ink. And whether she knew it or not, she'd just picked a fight with the most stubborn, regulation-savvy sheriff's deputy in the Tri-County area. Let the games begin. At first, I chalked it up to a one-off encounter, just a little overzealous enforcement by a woman who probably owned a monogrammed label maker and got high off the smell of fresh office supplies. But oh, how naive I was. Because as the weeks unfolded, it became clear that Linda wasn't just a stickler for the rules. She was the rules. Linda didn't merely enforce the HOA guidelines. She embodied them. She breathed them in like morning coffee and exhaled citations with the precision of a Swiss watch. And unfortunately for me, I had become her favorite test subject. It started subtly. A few more notices. Little things. One morning, I walked out to find another sunny yellow paper flapping under my windshield wiper, like an invitation to a rage-fueled barbecue. Violation. Section 7.2, Reflective Mailbox Finish. Linda had noted, with the glee of a woman who probably ironed her socks, that my black mailbox had a slight sheen, likely a factory gloss finish, but to her, it was a disco ball that threatened the peace of the cul-de-sac. Then came the grass. Violation. Section 11.1, Lawn Height Regulation. My grass, apparently, had reached an offensive height of 2.8 inches. The limit? 2.5? I kid you not. She cited me for 0.3 of an inch. She even attached a photo of my lawn with a ruler stuck in the turf. A ruler. Like she was doing forensic science on my front yard. It felt less like homeownership and more like living under an HOA-funded surveillance state. Somewhere, somehow, Linda was watching. Garbage day? Oh, you bet she had thoughts. Violation. Section 15.4, Refuse Container Timing. I had placed my trash can at the curb at 5:43 p.m. Pickup was the next morning, and the rule stated bins could not go out before 6 p.m. 17 minutes early. I was now a time criminal. I started keeping a notebook. At first, for laughs. But by violation number 9, it became more of a survival log. Linda's notes were always the same, neatly written in that damned purple ink, usually ending with a cheerful command like, "Let's strive for excellence together," or "Vigilance is beauty." I was convinced the pen was dipped in spite. And then she went for the crown jewel. Violation. Section 4.7, Excessive Vehicular Variety. Yes, that's a real thing. Apparently, the HOA limits residents to 2 personal vehicles visible on property, which is fair, in theory. But my third vehicle was a county-issued patrol car. Not personal. Not unregistered. Not a rusty pickup belching exhaust fumes. It had a sheriff's badge on the door, for crying out loud. I'd occasionally drive it home after late shifts, park it neatly in my driveway, lights off, fully compliant with traffic laws and common decency. But Linda? She saw it as a rolling affront to her sacred guidelines. She hand-delivered that notice. Showed up in person, armed with her clipboard and that unsettling Stepford wife smile. "Deputy Morrison," she said, tapping her pen on the edge of the board like she was conducting an orchestra of idiocy. Section 4.7 strictly limits residents to 2 personal use vehicles. Your sheriff's car constitutes a third. It's a county vehicle, I replied. Not personal. Not mine. It's on duty. Yes, but it's parked in a personal driveway, she said, as if she'd uncovered a loophole worthy of Supreme Court review. That makes it visible, which contributes to community clutter. Ma'am, it's a sheriff's vehicle. Yes, a commercial vehicle, by definition. And commercial vehicles are prohibited from driveway parking unless performing active service. It is my active service. She gave me a smile that could sterilize a houseplant. Rules are rules, deputy. She then proceeded to hand me a 3-page letter, single-spaced, of course, explaining how the presence of marked law enforcement vehicles could project an atmosphere of unrest and make the neighborhood appear less harmonious. It was written like a rejection letter from a country club that's way too into dress codes and golf cart alignment. Now, I've been insulted before. I once had a guy call me a discount RoboCop with a dad bod. But hearing my patrol car described as a disruptive aesthetic, that was a new level of disrespect. My neighbors started noticing too. I'd hear whispers like, "Hey, sorry about your grass," or, "I didn't know a welcome mat could be too friendly." Yeah, that one happened too. Violation. Section 8.9, Non-Regulation Doormat. My mat said, "Come back with coffee." Apparently, the appropriate message was hello. Anything beyond 2 words was considered a visual distraction. At some point, it stopped being funny. 17 citations in 6 weeks. 17. I was starting to feel like a character in a Suburban Kafka novel, where no matter what I did, I was always wrong in a very specifically codified way. But the tipping point? That came one Friday morning. It was 6:45 a.m. Still dark. My coffee was still too hot to sip, my brain not fully online, and I was backing out for an early shift. My cruiser was already warming up in the driveway. I hit reverse, glanced over my shoulder, and saw it. A red BMW. Not just parked near my driveway. Blocked. Horizontally. Across the street. Linda's BMW, forming a one-woman barricade in front of my cruiser like we were at a protest against decency. And there she was, standing next to it like a proud war general surveying her conquest. Clipboard in hand. Purple pen locked and loaded. My first thought was, this can't be real. My second thought was, of course it's real. She was here to escalate. To deliver the HOA's version of a cease and desist. Except instead of a letter, she brought a vehicle blockade and enough passive-aggressive energy to power a Tesla. I put my cruiser in park, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the cool morning air. Linda was already speaking before I closed the door. "Deputy Morrison," she announced with the kind of self-importance that should require a license. "We need to have a conversation about your continued disregard for community standards." And that's when I realized Linda hadn't just declared war. She'd launched the first strike. There are few things in life more surreal than being blocked from going to your law enforcement job by a woman wearing pearls and a blazer, holding a clipboard like it's a medieval shield of righteousness. But there I was, in my driveway at 6:47 a.m., staring at Linda Patterson's cherry-red BMW as it stretched across the street like it was auditioning for a role in Fast and Passive-Aggressive, HOA Drift. Linda stood beside it, arms crossed, radiating the smug confidence of someone who once returned a library book 3 minutes early and still brags about it at dinner parties. Her hair was styled in a way that suggested she woke up, heard the national anthem in her head, and decided to enforce suburban law with extreme prejudice. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just stood there with that infernal clipboard, as if the Constitution had been rewritten in purple ink and laminate. "Deputy Morrison," she said with icy formality, "we need to have a serious conversation about your flagrant and repeated violations of community standards." I took a long, deep breath. The kind of breath you take when you know you're about to have a conversation that drains years off your life. "Ma'am," I said, checking my watch, "I've got 13 minutes to make it to the station. Could we maybe have this conversation after I go do my actual job?" "This is your job," she declared, eyes narrowing like she'd been waiting for this moment since the Carter administration. "You're a member of this community, and 17 documented violations in 6 weeks is unacceptable. Unacceptable." She emphasized the last word like she was in a soap opera. I wouldn't have been surprised if she'd added, "You've disgraced this family name," and dramatically slapped me across the face. "Linda," I said, because I had lost the will to use her preferred honorific at this point, "you're blocking a public street. That's illegal. It's Mrs. Patterson, and I'm exercising my rights as a concerned resident." I raised a brow. By staging a one-car blockade? By conducting a civic intervention? She corrected me, as though that explained everything. "Now, I've talked people down from hostage situations. I've had drunks cry into my uniform about the meaning of life. But this was next level. This was HOA extremism. I glanced up and saw a few blinds twitching on nearby houses. Yep, the neighborhood was watching, and Linda knew it. She turned to face the invisible audience, clipboard raised like a ceremonial sword. This community, she began, addressing the air like it was a town hall, was founded on values, on order, on standards. And when those standards are threatened, by lawn overgrowth, by reflective surfaces, by flagrant vehicular abuse, we must act. Vehicular abuse? I asked, blinking. She nodded solemnly. You brought a patrol car into this neighborhood. Yes, because I'm a sheriff's deputy. Exactly, she snapped. And that kind of visibility creates tension. People see that car and think, what's going wrong in our neighborhood? You're bringing down the tone. I had to physically restrain my eyebrows from leaving my face. Linda, it's a sheriff's car. It's a symbol of safety. It's a symbol of crime, she shouted. It tells people that there's something to be watched. I am watching. That's literally my job. This isn't about your job, she said, stepping closer. It's about our values. If we allow one person to break the rules because of their title, what's next? Garage bands? Garden gnomes? People painting their doors red. She said, red doors, like she was describing a murder scene. Ma'am. Mrs. Patterson. I was running out of willpower and caffeine. Mrs. Patterson, I said with professional calm I barely possessed, I need to move my vehicle. I have to get to work. And I need a commitment, from you, that you will begin to take our standards seriously, that you will respect the code that protects our home values. I looked down the street. She wasn't kidding. Her car was parked horizontally, like a glittering automotive exclamation point. No way I could squeeze around it. So unless I make a public pledge to respect lawn regulations, I'm stuck here. Exactly. If you don't take a stand for order, then I must. You're blocking a police vehicle. Do you understand how insane this is? She sniffed. Insane is allowing welcome mats with fonts larger than 6 inches. This is civil responsibility. She meant it. She actually meant it. This wasn't a performance. This was her truth. Linda, you're making a scene. No, Deputy Morrison. You made the scene. With your 3 vehicles and your non-regulation mailbox gloss. And now I was certain. She was enjoying this. Thriving, even. Standing there with her clipboard like she was defending the last bastion of American dignity against the forces of mild parking variance. The radio on my belt crackled. Unit 47, what's your ETA for briefing? I keyed the mic. Dispatch, Unit 47 is currently dealing with a traffic obstruction. Stand by. Linda's eyes widened just slightly. The realization that obstruction might carry actual legal consequences flickered across her face like a solar eclipse. Brief, but glorious. I'm not obstructing, she insisted quickly. I'm advocating. For what exactly? For standards, she barked. For the invisible code that keeps civilization from descending into chaos. You think my SUV parked at a slight angle is going to cause societal collapse? I think exceptions lead to collapse. And I'm here to stop that. This was no longer a discussion. This was ideological warfare. Linda Patterson wasn't just the president of the HOA. She was the self-appointed guardian of suburbia's soul. And apparently, she was willing to go down swinging. For about 30 seconds, we just stood there. Me in uniform, coffee cooling in my cup holder, and Linda in what I can only assume was her ceremonial battle blazer. The only sound was the faint chirping of birds and the subtle hum of her BMW's unnecessarily loud engine idling across the street like a passive-aggressive barricade. It was the quiet before the HOA hurricane. You're really not going to move your car? I asked, just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating from stress and low blood sugar. Not until you acknowledge your violations and pledge to uphold Maple Ridge's community values, she replied, as if she were demanding the launch codes to a nuclear silo instead of compliance with lawn length regulations. Linda, Mrs. Patterson. I had to close my eyes and count to 5, and then to 10. Then I started counting traffic violations she was actively committing. You do understand that blocking a public street is not only against HOA policy, I said slowly, but also against actual, enforceable state traffic law. She sniffed. I'm not blocking anything. I'm stationed here as a concerned citizen. You're blocking me from doing my job. You've already neglected your job, Deputy Morrison, she snapped, by failing to address your 17 documented infractions. 17. I'd been keeping count too. And yes, she was right. 17 citations, each more absurd than the last. From mailbox reflectivity to garbage can choreography to a flagrant misuse of welcome mat typography. And now, a standoff over vehicular feng shui. My radio crackled again. Unit 47, status update? Still on scene. I replied, trying not to sound like I was reporting from inside a hostage negotiation. Civilian obstructing egress. That's when the audience started growing. Mrs. Chin peeked through her curtains across the street. She was the kind of neighbor who normally avoided drama like raw chicken, but she was practically pressed against the glass, phone in hand. The Hendersons stepped onto their porch and pretended to stretch while very obviously eavesdropping. Even old Mr. Kowalski, who usually only emerged to get mail and scowl at children, took his dog for what I can only describe as the world's slowest, most conspicuous walk around the cul-de-sac. Linda, naturally, interpreted this as her moment. She stood straighter, chin lifted like she was about to declare independence from the tyrannical forces of logical parking. Ladies and gentlemen, she called out to no one in particular, clipboard held aloft like the Ten Commandments. This is what happens when community standards are eroded. When residents, no matter their profession, believe they are above the rules. Is this a HOA meeting now? I muttered. Linda spun toward me. This is a reckoning. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from laughing. It wasn't the funny kind of absurdity. It was the kind of absurdity that makes you question your entire life path. Linda. Mrs. Patterson. Mrs. Patterson, I said, trying not to let my tone dip into sarcasm. You are currently preventing a law enforcement officer from reaching his assigned duty station. She blinked. No, I'm preventing further harm to our property values. I pointed to her car. You are literally blocking a public roadway. That's not just an HOA infraction. That's a citation. A real one. With legal teeth. I'm exercising my First Amendment rights. I blinked. To what? Block traffic. To petition for redress of grievances. This is not how grievances are redressed. Then perhaps you'd like to attend the next HOA board meeting and submit a written rebuttal, she said sweetly. We allow public comment for up to 3 minutes. I stared at her. This woman, this clipboard-wielding tyrant in LL Bean loafers was absolutely, positively, dead serious. I'm giving you one last opportunity to move your car, I said flatly. And I'm giving you one last opportunity to respect the sanctity of Maple Ridge Estates. My radio popped again. Unit 47, Sergeant Williams is asking about your status. Do you require assistance? Linda stiffened. Her eyes flicked to the radio like it was a wild animal that had suddenly growled. I pressed the button slowly. Negative, dispatch. Situation is developing. She took a half step back. Sergeant, she asked, tone shifting ever so slightly. Your supervisor? I gave her a nod. Yep. And if he shows up and sees this blockade, I'm not the one who's going to be answering questions. I'm just here to protect the standards, she said, less conviction in her voice now. And I'm just trying to protect the community from actual crime. But apparently I've got to get past the HOA first. Linda's eyes narrowed. You wouldn't call for backup over a discussion. Ma'am, you're blocking a police vehicle and interfering with a county deputy's duty assignment. That's not a discussion. That's a criminal charge. And for the first time since this whole ridiculous showdown began, Linda hesitated. Just a twitch in the jaw. A tiny bead of sweat at her temple. The cracks were forming. She glanced around. Her once riveted audience was still watching, but their expressions had shifted. Mrs. Chun had moved from the window to the porch. The Hendersons were no longer pretending to check the weather. They were filming. Even Kowalski was muttering something under his breath that I'm fairly certain wasn't supportive. The tide was turning, and I was just warming up. By 7 a.m., The street was no longer just a street. It was a full-blown amphitheater of HOA-fueled insanity. And Linda? She was center stage. The neighborhood audience had grown from curious observers to invested spectators. Mrs. Chun had brought out a folding chair. The Hendersons were now openly live-streaming. Even Mr. Kowalski had paused his snail-paced dog walk to stand with his arms crossed, radiating silent disapproval like a statue of neighborhood judgment. Linda, however, seemed emboldened, as if every eyeball on her clipboard-bearing posture added another layer to her suburban armor. She stepped forward, her voice rising with oratorical flair. "Neighbors of Maple Ridge," she began. Yes, began, like she was announcing wartime rations or running for HOA office again. This moment is not just about one resident's infractions. It is about all of us. Our standards, our unity, our values. She actually choked up on the word values. I thought she was going to pull out a flag and pledge allegiance to the mailbox. Is she giving a TED Talk now? I asked no one in particular. Linda heard me. "Deputy Morrison, you may wear a badge, but you do not wear immunity from the standards that keep our property values from plummeting into anarchy." Plummeting into anarchy. Because my grass grew 3 millimeters too tall. This was no longer a conversation. This was Linda's Oscar reel. I tried to keep my voice professional, even as my patience started packing its bags. "Mrs. Patterson, for the third time, move your vehicle. Blocking a public street is not a statement. It's a misdemeanor." "And for the third time," she retorted, puffing out her chest like a righteous eagle, "I will not yield to intimidation. I am acting on behalf of our entire neighborhood." She gestured at the onlookers for backup. The problem? The crowd wasn't nodding. They weren't applauding. They weren't even mildly supportive. Mrs. Chun raised her iced coffee in a slow, skeptical toast. "Linda, maybe let the man go to work." The Hendersons exchanged glances and went back to filming, narrating like wildlife documentarians. Here we see the North American HOA president asserting dominance with her natural enemy, common sense. Even Mr. Kowalski, who generally avoided speaking unless provoked by invasive lawn ornaments, offered a rare vocal opinion. "Lady's lost her damn mind," he muttered to his schnauzer. Linda's grip on her clipboard tightened. "I am enforcing standards," she said sharply. "If we allow deputies to disobey the handbook, next thing you know, we'll have flamingos in yards. Unregulated wind chimes. Garage doors left open overnight." That last one she said with genuine horror. Like open garage doors were a gateway drug to organized crime. "Mrs. Patterson," I said, voice low and deliberate, "this is your final warning. Move your car. Now." Before she could respond, my radio flared up again. "Unit 47, be advised, Unit 12 and 23 are en route to your location. Sergeant Williams will be on scene in 5. Linda went very still. And just like that, her HOA bravado hit a speed bump. "En route," she echoed, clipboard sagging slightly. "You called for backup?" "I didn't need to. Dispatch flagged it. Blocking a marked law enforcement vehicle? Kind of a problem." She blinked several times. "You can't be serious." "Dead serious. And if I were less serious, I'd be citing you for obstructing official duty." That purple pen she wielded like Excalibur? It started to tremble. I was just trying to enforce a community code. You parked at 7 degrees. You think that justifies detaining a sheriff's deputy?" "I wasn't detaining anyone. This is a conversation." "Oh, I've had easier conversations with handcuffed suspects." Linda's eyes darted to the approaching sound of a patrol engine. A low, familiar rumble cut through the tension like a blade. It was unmistakable, the kind of sound that meant authority had arrived, and not the clipboard kind. Then the first car turned the corner. Sergeant Williams. 25 years on the job. The man had been shot at, run over, and once bitten by an iguana during a meth bust. And now? Now he was arriving at the scene of the great HOA blockade of 2025. Linda's spine went rigid. Her confidence cracked like a pressure valve. Right behind Williams was Deputy Martinez in Unit 23, rolling up slow, windows down, sunglasses on. He gave me the world's smallest nod. The kind of nod that said, "Oh, it's that kind of morning." Sergeant Williams parked sideways, got out of his cruiser, and took in the scene. Me, standing in front of my own driveway. Linda, poised like a general who had just realized the cavalry wasn't coming. The BMW still defiantly sprawled across the street like a luxury barricade. He looked at Linda, then at me. "Deputy Morrison," he said slowly, "why am I here?" I didn't miss a beat. HOA president blocking a county vehicle over grass length and mailbox gloss, sir. Williams sighed so hard. I swear I felt it echo in my chest. Then he turned to Linda. "Ma'am," he said, his voice flat as an iron. "Is there a reason you're obstructing a public street?" Linda drew herself up, attempting one last stand. "I was acting to protect this neighborhood's visual integrity. His violations." "Ma'am," Williams interrupted, raising a hand. "You're blocking a law enforcement officer from performing his duties." Linda opened her mouth, closed it. Then she said the quiet part out loud. "I didn't think it would escalate." Williams stared at her. "You parked sideways in a road." I thought. "No, don't do that. Don't tell me you thought. Just move the damn car." And with that, Linda Patterson, the high priestess of the HOA, faced her first real consequence. Linda didn't move right away. Her brain was clearly trying to process the impossible math. She was wrong. Not just technically wrong, which she could usually massage with obscure rule citations and passive-aggressive newsletters, but legally wrong. The kind of wrong that doesn't get wiped away with purple ink and a smug grin. "Ma'am," Sergeant Williams repeated, his voice low and unmistakably done with this. "I'm not asking again. Move the vehicle. Right now." Linda blinked slowly, like an overworked computer freezing under stress. Her carefully constructed suburban power fantasy, complete with laminated bylaws and self-granted authority, was starting to fracture under the weight of real-world accountability. "But," she started, still clinging to the last plank of her clipboard-shaped ship, "his violations." Sergeant Williams stepped forward, slow and deliberate, until he stood just feet away from her. He wasn't angry. He was something far worse for people like Linda, unimpressed. "Mrs. Patterson," he said, with the tone of a man who once talked down an angry biker gang with nothing but a half-eaten granola bar. "We are not here to debate mailbox gloss or lawn measurements. This is not your HOA meeting. This is a public street, and you are obstructing an officer of the law. That's a criminal offense." Linda's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes flitted to the crowd behind her, her loyal subjects. Or, at least, the people she thought were loyal. Except now, they weren't clapping. They weren't nodding. They weren't even giving her the moral support of a polite golf clap. "Mrs. Chun?" Her arms were crossed. I think she muttered something in Mandarin that I'm pretty sure wasn't a compliment. "The Hendersons?" Still filming, still commentating. Day 37. The husband whispered theatrically. Linda remains firm in her commitment to absolutely nothing useful. Even Mr. Kowalski, who once filed a noise complaint against his neighbor's wind chimes, was now shaking his head and muttering, "Ridiculous." Linda's shoulders dropped. It was small, barely visible, but I saw it. The moment she realized her HOA throne wasn't a throne. It was a stool, a wobbly one, on fire. She stammered, still not ready to let go. "I just thought, if we don't enforce the rules." Sergeant Williams cut her off. "The HOA rules are civil. This is criminal. If you wanted to talk about community enforcement, you could have sent an email. Or, not blocked a county vehicle with a luxury sedan." Martinez stepped forward now, arms crossed, looking like the poster child for bored deputies everywhere. "Ma'am, I've worked traffic control at a tractor parade with more logic than this." Linda finally moved. Slowly, like her shoes weighed 100 pounds and her clipboard had fused to her spine, she turned toward her BMW. She fumbled with the keys. The engine gave a sad beep as she unlocked it. She looked back once, hoping, perhaps, for a final act of neighborhood solidarity. What she got instead was Kowalski's dog peeing on her lawn. She got in, started the car, and reversed, poorly. The kind of backup maneuver that ends up in worst parking fails of the year YouTube compilations. But eventually, she cleared the road. "My path was open. Thank you." I said to Williams, nodding. He nodded back. You good to go? Yes, sir. He turned to Linda. Ma'am, for the record, this is being noted in an incident report. I recommend not letting your next HOA meeting turn into a traffic obstruction seminar. Linda opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her clipboard hung limply at her side. Her purple pen clipped to her lapel like a sad badge of honor. As I pulled out and headed toward the station, I saw her in the rearview mirror, standing there, alone, diminished. The crowd was already starting to disperse. The HOA queen had lost her court. But my favorite part? 10 minutes later, I got a ping on my phone. Someone had uploaded the Hendersons live stream to the Maple Ridge Estates community page. Title: When HOA Met the Law, the Day Linda Blocked the Sheriff. And the comments? Glorious. About time someone stood up to her clipboard. Who knew HOA stood for hindering officers aggressively? My grass just grew an inch in celebration. Linda didn't comment. She didn't like or respond. But she saw it. Oh, she saw it. By Monday, the legend had spread like wildfire. Maple Ridge Estates hadn't buzzed this much since someone's labradoodle escaped and ran through the annual 4th of July cookout, wearing a diaper and dragging a firework. The Hendersons video had already racked up over 2,000 views in a private Facebook group with only 384 members. The comments section was a digital battlefield, mostly consisting of shocked laughter, memes of Linda photoshopped into roadblocks, and one very dedicated neighbor who uploaded a slow-motion montage of Linda's standoff set to the Gladiator soundtrack. But the most important ripple? The HOA board meeting that Thursday was standing room only. Linda, who previously ran meetings like a bored monarch, addressing neighbors with the same warmth you'd use to greet a tax audit, now sat hunched in her chair. The clipboard was still there, resting on the table like a fallen sword. But the purple pen? Gone. Replaced with a generic blue ballpoint, like even her office supplies had turned against her. When it came time for public comments, the floodgates opened. Mrs. Chun, polite as ever but with the precision of a scalpel, listed off 6 different rule changes she believed were outdated, unnecessary, or clinically insane, including the 2-vehicle limit per household, the mailbox reflectivity clause, the angular parking infraction, yes, by name, the anti-welcome mat regulation, the ban on visible security cameras, and, finally, the no flags besides American and seasonal rule, because her nephew had been cited for flying a pride flag. The board nodded. Some looked stunned, like they were seeing the HOA manual for the first time. Others scribbled notes like they were preparing for battle. Then came the vote. Linda's fate was sealed in less time than it takes to misalign a driveway parking job. A motion of no confidence passed with 8 out of 9 votes. The only abstention? Linda herself. She didn't fight it, didn't object, didn't even bother her usual trick of citing some obscure subsection from the 2003 HOA addendum on patriotic holiday decor placement. She stood up, quietly, and walked out. The clipboard stayed on the table, just left there, like a symbol, a warning, a relic from a darker time. The following week, the board voted in a new president, Mrs. Chun. And let me tell you, Mrs. Chun had zero interest in forming a suburban dictatorship. Her first act? Deleting the HOA's Angle Enforcement Task Force from the monthly meeting notes and replacing it with Neighbor Appreciation Week. Her second act? Officially tossing out 43 non-critical infractions, including mine. All 17 of them. Apparently, when someone tries to detain a sheriff's deputy with a BMW and a clipboard, people start questioning whether your mailbox paint is really a threat to democracy. Linda moved out 6 months later. Word was she bought a condo in a retirement community with assigned parking and a no HOA clause. The rumor mill claimed she tried to implement a towel folding regulation at the community pool, but the residents formed a defensive alliance faster than NATO. Me? I'm still in Maple Ridge. Still mowing my lawn. Sometimes at 2.7 inches just to live a little. Sometimes I leave my trash bin out an extra 10 minutes past regulation just to remember I'm free. And yes, sometimes I park at a rebellious 8-degree angle, just to honor the battlefield where reason finally beat regulation. Mrs. Chun? She waves from her window, sips her coffee, and minds her own damn business. Which, honestly, is all I ever wanted. Because in the end, revenge isn't always a fiery courtroom speech or a public takedown. Sometimes, it's just parking like a normal human being while your former dictator scrolls through Facebook in quiet exile. And every time I look at that empty house at the end of Oakwood Drive, the one with the pristine hedges and the aura of awkward silence, I remember, the clipboard fell. Long live common sense. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are watching from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.